And today I am very pleased to welcome Natasa Milic-Frayling, who is visiting us from the University of Nottingham in the UK. She's going to talk, I hope, a little bit about digital preservation and digital sustainability, which I think is a very interesting topic because, you know, in the world of software and IT being everywhere, there's this myth really that, you know, software lives forever and it's always going to be available. And of course that's not the case because there are different versions that become deprecated and outdated, and we lose those, and so we lose the memory, the history of our world in many ways. And this Natasa is involved in some initiatives that's trying to correct that problem. Natasa is also one of these people that is doing about 4 different significant things at the same time. So she was a kind of senior researcher at Microsoft Research in the UK for about 17 years. She's now professor and chair of data science at the University of Nottingham. So she does that. But she's also working very closely with UNESCO on this software heritage problem, and is leading an initiative there called, or leading part of an initiative there called Persist. And she's also chair of ACM Women Europe, as well as teaching courses in ethics and computer science. So she's got lots on her plate. So it's a real pleasure that she managed to find the time to come and visit us today, and I'm really looking forward to your talk. So I'll hand straight over to you.
Thank you very much, John. Thank you. Yes, so I will be telling you about the digital preservation issue of digital continuity, but I will put it in the context of I think what's important generally for us who are doing research, where we are looking at the design of computing systems and often try to study how people use these systems. And I'd like to share with you something that I have learned over the years, and hopefully may help you have another perspective on research, especially when we are talking about research that is focused on how computing systems are used. And because of such a wide proliferation of digital, almost everything we touch now somehow is relating to analyzing a log file from some system or some application or some other type of capturing of data that's in digital form. And so what I would just like to point out that when we are, with digital, we are creating new experiences and new realities for people. And so often in research we want to find the fundamental aspects of users' behavior. But what we are saying now, well, users are now embedded in digital, so whatever you're getting behavior within digital, already modified by digital. So the whole point of this presentation really is to draw attention to one thing. When we are studying computing systems, then we need to take into account a number of issues. And one of the issues is the design of that system that's already affecting the user behavior, and the purpose of that system, which often is about creating a value in the ecosystem in which system is delivered. So if you just look at the way we design computing systems, normally we have a requirement phase, we have specification phase. We have to have at least one scenario. Unless, of course, you're doing research and you say, okay, I'm going to create what we call technical probe, and I just put it there and see what people are doing. But even then, we have a hypothesis what might be the value that the software will bring. And so I'm pointing out here the difference between, as John said, in ethics, we're talking about human values, you're talking about societal values. So there is definitely that. It's about the desires, aspirations, and so on. But then also there's a very pragmatic part. When you're releasing the software, you're thinking hard, who are the stakeholders who produce this new digital environment, and who are going to be the users. And being aware of all the stakeholders is extremely important, even when you're doing research. And I'm guilty of it. I often just jump in. You give me a log, and I just start crunching numbers. And only some time later, I say, okay, well, but let me just understand, when I'm interpreting this, what am I interpreting? What am I now optimizing? And at that point, you really have to go back and say, okay, well, who are these people who I was observing? Or who are these people who deployed this? And what was behind it? And do I know everything about it? Do I know really everything about this system so that I can do the proper interpretation? Yeah. So I'm hanging this on this very narrow notion of value, which is sort of economic value. The benefits, here is, if you go online, you see there's a synonym of merit, worth, usefulness, how beneficial this is. So this is very narrow, but it's extremely important. It's important even when you are trying to present your research to somebody and say, okay, please give me some money, I'll do some good research. And by the way, this is my sustainability plan. And whenever you talk about sustainability plan, that means you're going to find out who that system brings value, who is prepared to pay you more money for sustaining that, so that you can do further research if you wish, but also continue to deliver value to people. So the whole presentation will be divided into a couple of case studies just to demonstrate this. I would just want to say that this little rosette here, where stakeholders are in the middle, sort of whenever you're starting something, it's really, really good to map out who are you interacting with and how you're going to get value to everybody, and be aware of what we call value chain, because often you see the first person that you are interacting with, but then it's very important to know who is the secondary, third, who is further away from you and deriving the value, because that's how we articulate the bigger impact and so on. So I have picked here 3 different use cases, and each of them sort of demonstrate awareness or lack of awareness, my own, about the value that was hidden, so not always explicated. In another environment where actually the value was crystal clear, and I just need to observe then how the design of the system reflected the value exchange. And the final one, the third one, will be about global ecosystem in which actually digital obsolescence happens to be economic problem, believe it or not. The reason why software doesn't work is not because we depleted intellect or depleted material to run programs. It's not that. It's all about sustainability and how the value chain works. Yeah. So let me start with the first one. And there's a little story there. When we were working in Microsoft Research, I had a team called Integrated Systems, and we really looked at a kind of holistic system from the architecture to algorithms and experiences. And one thing that bothered us so much is that people felt guilty about not knowing how to use a browser. So people go back to try to navigate to the website and go back, and they realize they're not always getting back to the page they've seen before. And that, of course, nobody explained to them that our back is a stack. So if you have a branching, you can only see the last branch. And it was really heartbreaking. We were observing users, and they said, oh, I really don't know how to use this thing. I get lost all the time. So we were trying to optimize and make things easy for people to use. So we had all these studies about back navigation, forward navigation, predicting where people want to jump to. Until a software developer told me, hey, Jamie, on my team, she said, Natasha, do you know what's happening behind? Do you understand what actually is happening? You're optimizing users' behavior, trying to help them browser, but do you know what's happening? I said, no. So what was happening? He told me about cookies. He told me about the traffic that is happening that people don't even know. Okay, so I didn't know. I was happily trying to optimize people's user experience at the top. Clueless, totally clueless about what was actually going on behind the scene. So this presentation is going to be about the value exchange that happens and is not explicit in the browser. And I hold this kind of a presentation. I've given this before, and I call it a depressing presentation, because at the time when I was giving it, there was nothing you could do. But now we have a movement, GDPR, in England at least, big, about protection, data protection and privacy. So things are moving, but they're not moving because of the citizens. They didn't move because we complained. We didn't complain because we didn't know. It moved because the politicians got affected. Democratic system, elections got affected. So there was another reason why things happen. But I just want to show you what happens to us, citizens, who are just dealing with user interface. And the value proposition here is, I type in URL and I read what's on the page. And so the value proposition to me, you find your information for free. Yeah? So, but if I look more carefully here, there are lots of things on that page. This is the New York Times. So I go to New York Times, type in, and I'm assuming that I'm getting news from New York Times. I don't notice often all of these other bits and pieces, and these are the third parties coming in and composing a page right here in front of me. So what actually happens is, it is me here, I'm consumer, then there is an advertiser, and there is a website. And if you look at the broader ecosystem, it's a thing that I don't know, is completely hidden from me, is that these ads that end up in the web page here are actually part of a quite sophisticated, extremely sophisticated mechanisms of real-time bidding on people's clicks and visits. And then all of that really is in real time. And let me explain you how real time. In 100 milliseconds, when I type in New York Times, at that moment, the system is informed that I have typed in URL. The page is composed, so therefore somebody knows that I'm here on it. If there is any history on it, they bid on me. By the time, within 100 milliseconds, when the page is completed, all the advertisements are already there. And I call this the marvel of the 21st century. These are the pyramids of the 21st century. This is the technological achievement. This is absolutely amazing for millions of people in 100 milliseconds. So, the only question then is, why didn't I know anything about this? I mean, somebody designed this user interface, and I was advised by talking to my colleagues who are also at IIT. They said, oh, Natasha, but now you just go into Firefox, type in about, and then configure whatever they do, and then you can see all the cookies. In every modern browser, if you know how to get there, they will list you for your cookies. I said, yes, but how many people know about it? So there's a question about transparency, if you wish. Is it transparent that you need to type this in and then get the cookie list? To me, it doesn't seem, but maybe this is another thing that we need to think about in HCI. What does it mean having a transparent and easy-to-use interface? But let me show you here what we've done. So this is Firefox, and then we created a little app that was dropping cookies from top of your page, and they kind of land on the bottom. Imagine how annoying that would be. But anyway, this is just to make a point. And so on this page here, you see all of these candies on the bottom, these bars, they're actually domains that are tracking us. So these are third parties that are involved in this page. They're not all trackers. They're just associated with the page. And then I will show you the study we've done was exactly to try to figure out what was going on. So this green one is in fact all the cookies that are coming from this website, from New York Times. And you can argue, okay, that's fine. They say they need it. And cookies are useful because they maintain the state and they manage processing, communication. Okay, they need it. So you say, okay, this is fine. I agree. I came to New York Times. They need it, fine. But who are these other ones? Yeah, so who are they? And so you start unpicking. Whenever you see red, that means that this domain was shown on other websites that I as a person seen. So not anybody else, it's just me. This is my cache, web cache, and is being looked at, okay? So if I kind of click on this one, this is New York Times, and these are all the cookies, 68 cookies from New York Times. Good, they need them, okay? Pretty good number, isn't it, 68? So then you go and say, so how about this one? Well, this is Doubleclick.net, and Doubleclick.net has only 4 cookies. That is red, and it's red because Doubleclick is also found on 121 other pages that I visited. So 121 other pages, that means it's a pretty good network that Doubleclick.net has when they can strike an agreement with other web pages to be present when I land on that page. Okay, and there's another one. So here is scorecard, 3 cookies, and 82 others. Okay, so they're obviously domains that are quite interesting to people. So just a little bit about what's happening. When I go to a website, they create me with cookies. And by the way, these are baked by an administrative assistant at Nottingham, so she shared this with me. So these are the cookies that she makes for Halloween and other things. So there's a theme here. So there's a kind of exchange between me and the website I go, right? And so these cookies for people who are not in this area. These are small, the short messages that are going between the browser and the web server. And they normally communicate. Computer scientists were very careful how to design this communication. In fact, in 1990s, computer scientists were very, very careful to avoid abuse of cookies, this communication bit. But that didn't prevent what actually is happening for a number of reasons, what actually is happening, how they're exploited at the moment. So we have done a study and gave people this little app that I showed you with cookies to browse around. And then we mapped the relationship between these parties that are involved. And this is the result of a 7-day browsing of one person. So what you see here, green, are the websites that the person goes to. And inside are the trackers. And they're different colors. And I'll explain in a second. So say if I go to Forbes, yeah? So as soon as I land on Forbes page, all of these other parties are involved. They know I'm there. And so among them are these kind of bright red and some purple ones. And the bright red, I'm picking this one here. That's the Doubleclick.net, one that I just showed you. Yeah. So Doubleclick says in links, so there are errors going from the green dot Doubleclick, meaning that whenever I get on the green page on the website, they're informed. So this kind of communication just a signal. So they get informed, but then also, you see there's a signal going to other dots in there. And so that means that these sort of companies are brokers. And there are other ones, so like the purple ones, normally they are just one way. So in this instance, just go back quickly, in this instance, Doubleclick is a company that was set up by Google. So they track people across web pages. And then another one here, this one here is Google Analytics, for example. They only have one-way directions from websites to the centralized place where you have analytics. So they know exactly what's happening within the website. So in a way, a company like Google has both ways of tracking across websites and within a website. Yeah. And where are we? Well, we are nowhere here. You see? These are the contracts, if you wish, between the websites and the trackers. And we are little ants. We are going from one place to another. We are going along this, and they bid on us. So we are outside this value chain. That's what I want to say. Okay, so just kind of quick to understand a little bit the impact of this, because this is not about. So it's not about my browser. It is actually about the state of the web. That's most important thing to understand this. And so if I'm on the web and do search, so here is like two interfaces. One is Google, one Bing. We did the experiment and ran 650 queries on both search engines. And then we want to see the pages that we get in the results. Who are the trackers on those pages? Because I want to know how quickly did they get me? How quickly did they start tracking me? Yeah. So just for people who are in information retrieval, we used a data set called KDD Cup. It was in 2005. At that time, it was very interesting to classify queries, and you wanted to understand people's intent. So they had a data set. And so we can pick queries of different type, because we want to see whether different queries are more appealing to the trackers, right? So we thought, okay, maybe there is a difference. So we picked 600 queries, and among them different types of queries. And we ran the experiments, so we ran search results in 4 different English-speaking markets. Yeah? So we went India, South Africa, United Kingdom, United States, to see whether there is any difference. And this is what we get. So you get a network of nodes. The white circles are websites, and everything else that's red are some sort of third parties. Yeah. And this is what we call the connected components. So if you look at the networks, then you can look at the connected components within a graph. So it's one big ball, and it's impenetrable. So we forced it into clusters, applied a couple of different algorithms, and kind of force it apart and it gives them some structure. It seems that some of the websites are more associated with some trackers than others. You can expect, because, say, in UK you may have a number of these advertising companies, so websites may be more kind of connected with them than some other more remotely. So this is the structure you get, and this was, say, for Indian market, just looking at Google search results. So for every result, I just check what are the trackers associated with it, and then I create a graph. That's basically how we've connected the graph. And then this is similar in the United States. So geographically doesn't make any difference, it seems. And if you look at the analysis of the graphs, what's the most important thing here is this giant component. How many nodes are in that component and how connected they are. And then from these statistics here, you can see that, in fact, a huge percentage of nodes are in there. So 92, 90, almost in all markets across both search engines, you have more than 90% of nodes in that component. And then connectivity is really, really high. Almost 99% of edges are in that component, which means whoever is not in that component doesn't count. They're not relevant because they're not connected. Yeah? So you realize that just from this, just looking at the search, that we are dealing with a really, really interconnected website and tracker ecosystem. And then the final thing, this is relevant for me because I want to know how quickly they start tracking me. So after 5 clicks, if you just look at, say, 5 search results, yeah, each of these lines is the kind of probability that one of these parties will be tracking me. Google Analytics, Doubleclick, Google.com, Facebook, Google Syndication, some kind of G-static, scorecard, these are all trackers. And top ones, once you look at the search results, they appear everywhere in all the markets. So this is each of them separately, and this is all of them. So after 5 clicks, almost 100% I will be got by Google Analytics. It's understandable because all the websites are trying to get Google Analytics to give them analytics about web usage, so not surprising. But if you really, really want to be tracked by everybody, look, you only have to do 20 clicks, all of them at 90%. So if you really, really want good advertisements, 20 clicks is all it takes. Okay? The thing is that you didn't ask for advertisements, right? But hey, this is the value they gave you, and you were not involved. So that's basically what's most bothersome in this. I'm outside, as a user, I'm outside the value chain. Okay, and a final, just one more thing on this one. I told you it's depressing. One final thing, because this actually goes into another type of value. This is not about benefits, this is now about other type of value, and the reason why it's so difficult to digest one is because of our kind of participation in social media, where we often share things because we want to do something good. You want to disseminate information that's important. So you go on Twitter, and then in Twitter you embed the URL, right? You find something interesting, you want to inform your colleagues, you want to inform students, you stick that URL in. And guess what happens? When somebody receives that URL, they've been tracked. That's not what you intended, did you? I mean, it wasn't. I'm pretty sure you didn't intend that. So then you see what happens is the sharing then becomes part of harm. Yeah? I mean, it would be very nice if actually you, when you are putting in URL, Twitter will basically have a warning and say, look, if you actually click on this URL, these 10 trackers are going to be on your back now. Yeah? That would be the warning that perhaps if you wanted to remedy this, you'll do. But you didn't know, so how could you? So that's why I'm basically saying that this value exchange suddenly started encroaching on other types of values. I'm just showing you this one example where normally you have choice, we have no choice. When people just inform you that they're using third-party cookies, and then the only thing you have is, okay. Now, because of GDPR, they give you some kind of choices and you can turn things off. So they're getting better. But it's still, because there is no choice, this is all you can do. And let's quickly on this, I just want to illustrate what happens then when you're sharing your URLs. We have looked at the Twitter data set, and we picked some of the topics that are popular, and then also some of the users that are being followed on Twitter, and see how URLs are being shared. And so this is the data set. We had about 5 million tweets in the topics and 7 million, almost 8 million in the top users. And then you can see how many of them actually contain URL. So with topics, people share more URLs. When it comes to top users, they're just gossiping about what the movie stars did. Okay, so less of a URL sharing. But in the topical ones, you have it, especially say in the politics. And let me show you. This is a social network now of politics graph, where in this graph here, node actually is a person, and we only looked at the tweets with URLs in. So no others. So these people are retweeting each other. So I embed URL, and you receive it and you retweet to others. And then we try to partition this a little bit. Again, you saw it, the connected component was very strong. People are interconnected highly. But then if you try to force it a little bit in the clusters, you see some of the clusters appearing. And the red nodes here are still users. Essentially, the size of a node is a number of followers, but the color are actually those that are very active. So the red ones are the ones that are propagating this. And you know what this means, actually? This means that these people are contaminating each other all the time. So when one starts sharing URLs with trackers, every time somebody clicks on it, they get trackers back. So even if you clear a cache, yeah. So yet, you and I, we didn't think about this, right? I didn't know about this. It turned out that this is my social network, yeah, under 50,000 topics, nodes. And then on that, I had 25,000 nodes that are tracking. Okay? So we are talking about a real ecosystem that, in order to understand the value exchange, we need to kind of classify, understand who is who in this kind of ecosystem. And this is the last graph I promised. This is just trackers. So it's almost like a classification of trackers. What's interesting, the red ones are the ones that are already introduced. So like Doubleclick and so on. The green ones are servers that are just serving ads. So that's why kind of benign, okay? The blue ones are most interesting. You see, I never seen these. I never seen Doubleclick. I don't go to their website. I don't interact with Doubleclick. Here I put a couple of nodes. These are actually websites. And this whole graph was created only from these about 10 websites here. So this is not, and I'm just showing classification related to these 10 websites. And so, for example, if you see this one, eHow. If you remember, if you don't know how to change the bulb or tires on your car, you just type in and then eHow will tell you. And eHow, actually, the whole business model, obviously, of that website is about advertisement. So they're right here. And you see, they're pointing to red ones, the green ones, which are advertising, but they're also pointing to other websites that we actually have a relationship with. I have a relationship with Facebook. I have a relationship with MSN. There's an exchange of value there, or at least I thought, right? I thought that if I have a Facebook, I know exactly what they give me. I know exactly what I'm getting. Yeah, but they actually have dual purpose. So this little F sign or T sign or that you find on web pages, these are not just little icons. They're trackers. And they're everywhere. Yeah? So, just to summarize this one, so this is really about understanding the exchange of value on the web. I, as a user, I have a value through information access. I pay through my privacy, and I didn't know. Because nobody told me what the price was. I thought it was information for free. It turned out not to be. And then there is a power and value chain, which is between the information providers, the web pages, and the trackers. Yeah. As I said, it's the present talk, but it's not. This part I think we're on very, very good track, because of these other events that happened. This is becoming more visible. I teach ethics, as John said, and I I was disappointed and astounded that, in fact, what I believed that privacy is a right. I thought it's my right. But it turned out, if you look at the ethics frameworks, you don't have a right for privacy. In fact, there are so many theories about what privacy is that nobody agrees, and in no framework, actually, they will tell you that privacy is your right. And they will always talk about the balance between an individual and a society. It's the contract between me and the rest of the society that I depend on. I'm a mathematician. I can solve some problems, but I don't know how to grow carrots. I need somebody who can grow carrots. I like carrots. So I am dependent on other people to provide me services. And so in that exchange, there's always a balance. There's a balance of social good and for the society, a different society regulated differently, and what I feel I want for myself. And so what actually happened, a compromise in technology, we don't talk about the privacy as a right, but we often talk about the guidelines to create privacy respecting designs. So, and that's the best we can do in computing profession. Okay, now I'm going to move to the second scenario, and this one is much nicer because it's very explicit value exchange. This is about the e-commerce platform, and the only reason why I'm showing this is because it relates to what we often do in data science. In data science, we study logs, click streams. We study footprints that are left in systems. And what's fascinating, all these footprints and logs, they kind of go back to the software engineering, right? We need to debug something, so we have a log. We can look at it. But in fact, logs became the main value. They are driving now the value, because now you can start modeling user behavior, you can start predicting, you can start optimizing the system. So what was simply done for other reasons now becomes the main value, the currency often. Data becomes currency. So just a quick overview of the ecosystem here. We have sellers and buyers. The platform here, e-commerce platform, is a broker. So it's all about transactions. And the broker may have a couple of other partners. So this is in particular related to JD.com. In China, there are 4 Amazons, not one. They're all heavily competing for 1.5 billion people who are shopping online. So I have a student who is working with them very closely because they're optimizing their platform. And the number of questions they're asking, and we're helping with that. I use Amazon here so you can see more clearly, instead of showing you Chinese, what normally is the design of the system. So in e-commerce, interfaces are almost standardized. If you just look at Amazon, look at others, they all have a couple of stages supported. So one is about information search. I need something, I go and find out. I type in, or I browse through the categories. Then I may go and kind of evaluate alternatives. So I'm presenting the choices, and I'm looking at different aspects of the products. And say then I buy. I put it in the basket, I pay, I'm done. At the end, I may engage in reviews, or even within the process when I'm looking at alternatives, I may engage. But after I'm done, I may share my experience, I answer other people's questions, and so on. So this is basically what is in design. Now, if you look at the marketing literature, for ages, actually for about 30 years now, in marketing what's being used is the model called consumer purchase decision process. So there's a very, very clear model that has been used in business when people are trying to model user behavior. How do you move somebody from their need to purchase? How do you do that? And then also, what happens after? Because you want to sell again. And so if you just look at this, the design of e-commerce very much mimics what is normally done in the physical world. And so what's interesting then to observe is, if I wanted to predict purchases online, do I need to know, and how can I use this information when I'm looking at the logs? So this is really the point here, that understanding the process and understanding also that the click stream reflects the design and the stages in the purchase. I can do much better in predicting than if somebody came in logs and I started improvising. Say, oh, I'm going to look at the duration of a session. I'm going to look at the number of clicks. I'm going to look at the ratio of clicks. So essentially, understanding the design and understanding the process helps me then select features and so on. So I'm just going to quickly give you some idea what actually happened. We looked at the click stream that comes from JD.com and say, okay, what are the features in the click stream that kind of corresponds to these? Information search, evaluation of alternatives. Can I detect that they are just about to get engaged in the purchase behavior? And what do they do afterwards? And so, in fact, here are the features that we identify. We just give them a shortcut. So keyword search, or repeated view, or comparison, chat. And so we created a model based on two different levels of granularity. So here we have 8 features that correspond to these phases, and here we get 14, so a bit more. Because we wanted to see, what if I go really, really precise? If instead of having, in this case, viewing an item, am I viewing for the first time, and am I going again to view it? So basically you refine the analysis of the click stream. And I just want to see whether making it more complicated or more sophisticated it would help with features. We had a very, very short span, only 6 weeks, and we used two data sets. This one here is available in the public domain, and they only give you the viewing of the products or comparison of the products. While with the JD data, we have very, very detailed click stream. Okay, and you can think about a session as a basically progression of steps. People are just clicking, doing things, and your goal is then to know that if this is a session, can you predict that this is going to be purchase or non-purchase? It's simple. So you train on the previous data, on purchases, non-purchases, and then you just start, new session starts. Can you tell me what's going to happen? That's basically the problem. Is it going to be purchase or no purchase? We did actually 2 problems. One was just, okay, give me the whole session, and it's a classification problem. I'm just going to look at it and I say, oh, I'm guessing this is purchase or no purchase. Another one is much more interesting. Another one is when you start browsing, and you give me kind of 10% of the session. Can you tell me now what's going to happen? Give me 20%. Can you tell me now what's happened? So it's like a real-time predicting whether somebody is going to purchase. And why is that important? Well, now if you go shopping or go to websites, you have a couple of clicks and then pops up, oh, do you want to talk to me? Now companies are all going with chats. They want to engage. They don't want to lose you. So, you know how annoying that is. I don't want that, right? JD doesn't want that. They like to chat, but only if they think that they can lose a sale. So if you start the session and you know after, okay, at this point you're getting signals that the person is going to leave, they're not going to purchase, you may want to intervene. If you think it's okay, if your predictor is already saying, okay, this is 90% chance it's going to be purchased, just leave it, yeah? Okay, so I'm just showing you this, some interesting insights. We have found out that people who are not buying, if it is a non-purchase session, they'll leave within 10 minutes. So very good to know, right? Because it's a very strong signal already. Another one was also interesting is if you look how many different types of actions people do in a session. So more diverse number of actions means that they went further down the purchase cycle, meaning that they did comparison, they did viewing, they put in the basket. So for purchases, look, more of the purchase sessions actually have more of the different features. Also a very good signal. And the final thing is, if you look at what sort of things people do, whenever the purchase ones are these blue ones, you know, they like to do comparison. They like to do keyword search. So they're more engaged. So this is all good news. Because now I know that the design of the system, you see, the click stream comes from the design of the system. The system is telling me that, just looking in an intelligent way, that I can have much better features, that I can predict how far people are. And truly, this is actually what happened. There's another aspect I didn't mention. Remember at the beginning it was like a sequence going from information need all the way down to the purchase. And so you're expecting that these actions are going to come in a sequence, some kind of logical sequence. You're not going to have a comparison before you do search. right? So that means that the features are not independent. And it's better for you to look at the sequences or some kind of association of features sets. Again, most of the papers written on clickstream analysis are done on single feature or kind of ratio. Ratio is the best way they would do some kind of dependence. But why? You see, HCI people say, that's crazy, you guys, in machine learning. Why don't you look at the system? You know, all the features are there. You can see, don't you see it? Yeah? But again, only if you look at the process, underlying process, and think about the human experience, only then you start applying it more intelligently in machine learning. And these are really good numbers here. These are the area under the curve, so that you can measure how well you're doing both on recall and precision. And the best performing one is actually the sequences. The sequences of actions. And then we also tried to compare, and we did the same thing. You see, the sequences of actions plus other ones. This shows you then, yes, there is dependence among features, and if you do it with that, you'll be fine. Final slide, no more graphs, promise. So this is about predicting when you have only part of the session. So 10% of a session, 20, 30, and so on. And so look, if you go up to 80% of a session, that means I have still 20% of clicks before somebody leaves the session. I can intervene. At 80%, we're doing very well. With 90% AUC, we can predict that it's going to be purchased or non-purchased. So it's all good news. But my point here is, it's all because we basically went to the basics and said, okay, design reflects the transaction and the value that is supposed to be exchanged. Is the transaction between the consumer and the seller. And the platform is facilitating this. Interface fully embodies that interaction. It's very compatible with my decision process. And therefore, my work as a machine learning person is much easier. Then I know how I can exploit this because there's a trace of this. Yeah, okay, so this is a sort of value exchange within the platform, and this is the last one. This is now the ecosystem one, as I said. And it has to do with understanding the digital, what digital is. So the problem that we all have, whatever you write an algorithm, even for your research. After you publish a paper, a couple of years later, probably nothing is going to run, right? And it doesn't run because bits are missing. Even if you create an executable, put it somewhere, it may not run anymore because the operating system changed. If you have source code, the compiler is not there. So all sorts of stuff, right? Some of that is, you must say, some of that is, how do you say, tidiness and management, okay? And this is not solving that. You know, I have kids, I can't make them make their beds, or I can't make them make, this sort of thinking doesn't solve that. So content management and practices that are actually in place to tidy things up, that's one thing, and that's going to be with us forever. It's related to thermodynamics, the second law of thermodynamics. It just happened that my thesis was in second law of thermodynamics for phase transitions. So, and I feel all my life I'm fighting thermodynamics and getting old. Without work, can't do anything. Work can slow down certain things, right? But generally, chaos prevails. If you don't put work, chaos prevails. So we are not solving that part. But what's interesting thing here is to understand whether we can stabilize the environment in which the software can run if you have all the bits and everything is in order. Just a little bit of the ecosystem. So the ecosystem can be seen kind of in three big chunks. Here are the technology providers, and this is a kind of ICT community. We don't call them ICT industry because open source community belongs here, and you are also here. I'm here. Whoever is creating software is here. So we write programs. Some of the tools are distributed widely and used by many, many people. And then based on these, we have two things that happen. We create assets. These are files. We normally preserve files. But the only reason why we preserve files is because we don't want to rerun things every time from scratch. And also my programs are written in source code. They're stored in files because I'm not retyping it again and again and again. Yeah, so the reason why we have persistence is because we don't want to have to redo things again. and we have this off button. Otherwise, if everything is all the time in memory and run forever, you don't have files. So we've got assets that they are permanently stored, but they, with the program, they create the experience. And this is basically how we sense the content, how we humans can perceive it. We can't perceive bits that are stored. We can't also do this either. So we need these two, and then these things are then presented to us in a way that our senses can detect. Now, but this ecosystem is actually like this. This part here is very unstable. So it's really, really fuzzy, because it's changing so fast, and it's kind of unstable equilibrium all the time. And it's all driven by innovation. But the innovation that is not aligned. So somebody comes up with a new printer and a printer driver, and you've just created an operating system, and now you have to make sure that that thing is in. Okay? If you're shipping and if you want people to be able to use right away. So as people are innovating and they are out of sync, this system is continuously trying to rebalance itself in order for people to be able to use it. So that's the nature of this part. Because of that, first of all, a second part is that we are kind of worried about electricity shutdown, or losing our USB, or wherever we store stuff. So we are increasing the replication on the file storage. And we actually train to think about this. So some people will ask, where is your data? Oh, yeah, I put it here, I put it there, it's all there. I backed it up, I was good, I backed it up. So, you take care of your stuff, make sure you back it up. So this is growing, because in, say, archiving, often they say 7 replicas for one to survive. So there are certain practices in replication. But this thing here, because of instability of the technological part, we've got fuzziness in the experience. So experience may degrade. The worst thing is when something runs and stops running. This kind of step function goes from 1 to 0. It doesn't run. Then you have to be clever, see what we can do. So this is kind of digital ecosystem, and the way the value is exchanged is very, very interesting. The producers of software do their own stuff. Of course, they cannot be completely independent from users because users buy. But they remove software at any time. There's absolutely no guarantee. Nowhere, if you look at any licenses, there's nowhere guarantee that your stuff will not be damaged, or that there is a guarantee that the software will be around. So all these digital assets that are created on the other side by the content users, that can be damaged, that can be annihilated completely if the software is removed. And it all depends whether there are substitutes in the ecosystem. Of course, if there are substitutes, then of course whoever produced the first part of the software is sharing the market. So they are not the most powerful. There are other players in the market that can substitute, and you can still use your assets. So as a user who is a content owner or content guardian, so libraries and archives are guardians of the content, digital content, they are really in a kind of vulnerable situation, because they don't control the technology part, yet they have to promise to the society that they will preserve stuff forever. A really, really hard task. So the question then is, what's happening, and why is this? Is there anything that we can do in understanding the cost and value proposition here? The issue, companies that are not maintaining software for a long time are not doing it because it's economically infeasible. So they're not mean. It's impossible to incur the cost of innovation and yet maintain everything that's behind. Especially that everything that's behind is a long tail and is very rarely used. So it doesn't generate enough value. So it's an economic factor that is actually causing this. So the question then is, what can we do? Just understanding these value principles. So this is what I mentioned before. You have a file. You cannot see. Digital artifacts exist only when you instantiate it with the program, and it only lasts while the program lasts. So you stop using the program, artifact disappears. And this is really, really hard to kind of fully appreciate. And it applies to both the digitized content. Lots of libraries and archives digitized physical content and put it in a digital form. And God forbid, but sometimes they destroy the physical one. which means that they put information in the most vulnerable medium. Yeah, and often it's called preservation, but it's not preservation. I mean, with all of these properties, it's not called preservation. Yeah, it shouldn't be. So when the software is not available, you simply can't have. Yeah. And I just want to show you, this is endangering even the process of preservation. I'm just showing you one example. This is a company, Tamil Vista, that has really, really neat software. They have working libraries and archives. They have a software that if you have a manuscripts in, say, Sanskrit or a Korean script and so on, so you can't OCR it very easily. So they basically cut a piece of image, a character, and then do image search. Really nice. They use our vision technologies to do the indexing of manuscripts. And their software is being used by nuns in Taiwan, Buddhist nuns, who are working on projects that last for 25, 30 years. But this is a company only 2 years in business. So what's going to happen with that effort if they don't succeed? Yet they have very useful software. And when they create index, that index depends on that software. Yeah, so in a way, we see that the economic factor is much, much harder a factor here. So what we need to do then is think about software, how the software can gradually age. You don't have the step function from 0 to 1, or 1 to 0. And how do you come up with a model that is aligning the cost of maintenance with the cost of usage? So the best thing to do is if you can achieve the economy of scale. And just quickly run up here. So this is what normally happens. You have file, application, and digital content. And say your application doesn't work. What people then do is they transform the file into another format, which means they're bidding on another type of application. And this is an example. So this is the old Microsoft Word document, and it was transformed into a new one. Unfortunately, the layout is not proper. There are always problems. Then you say, okay, I don't care, I'm not going to give up on my file ever. Then it means that you have to port the application. That basically costs you. And the final thing is, okay, you say, okay, fine, I'm not going to give up on the file, and I'm not giving out an application, I'm going to virtualize this. I basically encompass this, and I'm just showing you some screenshots here. This is the Windows 2000, this is the Windows XP, running next to each other. I can show you applications from both era, from 2000. And this is a map point, if anybody remembers. This was before Google. My kids don't believe we had anything before Google. So we had maps, and this is a money application where it's very important because you can't simply transform this because you have calculations in. And nobody will guarantee you a spreadsheet converted to another spreadsheet is going to be fine. So Windows 98 we can virtualize. We can CN Carta 98, no problem. So the point here is we can basically virtualize stuff back to 1988, 1985. Yeah. So UNESCO is very keen and wants to engage, especially with computer scientists. So this is called to all of us because nobody else can do this. Nobody else can solve the problem of digital obsolescence except us. So the idea really is to engage with UNESCO. There is a Persist initiative, and at the moment this is how it's structured: technology and research, content, and policy. And I sit here in this area, and I'm working with the ACM, Association of Computing Machinery, to raise awareness, and hopefully, together we can solve the problem. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Natasha. We have a little bit of time for a couple of questions. Yeah, there's one there.
You were talking about virtualizing so that you can run old applications. Can you think of a way to handle applications that need a licensed server?
So in fact, it just happened that I'm working I have my own company and I'm working exactly on that issue. So it is not a problem, in fact. You can have a licensed server right in your environment and you call it. But you can't do anything without having an agreement with the ICT industry. So libraries and archives don't talk to ICT industry because they think that Microsoft and Oracles and others, they're all evil. But no, if you have a proper value proposition with them, no problem. And most of the time you can ask them, so how much money do you want for usage of your old stuff? And if you ask them that question, they say, oh, Probably not, because it's not going to be much. But not asking at all is not the thing. So with the UNESCO, we are actually trying to start a discussion about the licensing. Once you have that, then it's not a problem.
Any other questions? Any questions at Caulfield? I'm going to ask a question. So, because we talked about human values before the talk, and you kind of went to great pains to kind of make a distinction between the value that you talked about in this talk, which was, I guess, focused more on economic value, and the kind of human values that I'm interested in more broadly, and how we design software for those. But actually, I think the examples you gave are very much along the lines.
Yeah.
So the cookie example, I mean, the key value there is transparency.
Yes.
And depending on whether you value transparency or not,
Yes.
you may or may not in different situations, you're
Yes.
going to design the system in a very different way. So just wondered if you could comment on that.
Yes, absolutely. I only mentioned the economic one because the current software engineering practices are actually, we are trained to do that. We are trained to look at economic value. Because we know that if you release a software that nobody wants, nobody's going to pay. Then you can't pay your developers. So economic value, but they're so, when we are looking at the usability, for example, already there are some of these are already in the mix. But the ones that kind of second order effects, like if you don't have transparency, guess what happens then? You are encroaching into privacy. Of course, the software engineer they were just worried about the requirements for the basic scenario. And it's much harder for us to predict what are the second or third order effects. So that's why we stay away. But now we have, after so many years in industry, we can predict some of this stuff. And I think what you're trying to do, from the lessons learned or additional research, is exactly focused on that.
Yeah.
We can have best practices and say, look, these are the risks.
Great. All right. I think our time is probably up, so let's just thank Natasha again, and she'll be hanging around here if you want to ask her more personal questions. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you for your attention.